Greetings, nerds. This is CNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing today, Will?
Doing very, very well, Sarah. How about you?
Doing good. So, how many times have you rewatched that awkward conversation from Collider Live? Because I'm at least like 10 times.
Yeah. I watched it a couple of times for sure, and then of course Friday, was it Friday? Yeah, I was just when Kristian was not on, and I was like, does someone have to go to the principal's office for the weekend or what? And then of course Makuga and Riley did not ignore the elephant in the room, even though they poked fun at Roka with that joke as well.
Yeah. For those who don't know what we're talking about Thursday's episode of Collider Live, where there was a heated argument, to say the least, about responsibility in production between Kristian Harloff and another coworker. And, I have to agree with Mark Riley on it, though. It is really good radio. Because every now and then, I think that's why shows like that work so well, is because you wonder, they're not actors or actresses. They're real people who are trying to produce content and earn money. And it does, egos flare. And so it's interesting to sometimes see those cracks.
Yeah. Not that our production meetings ever go get that heated.
No. We're much too low timers.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good word for it.
Yeah. I guess to give folks some context, I guess Kristian was really pissed off because of the, Star Wars Galaxy experience opened up, and folks who are familiar with Collider know he hosts the Jedi Council show, and so he's a huge Star Wars fan. So he was not invited. The show wasn't invited, but I think a couple other freelancers from Collider were invited, and so he was really butthurt by it, and it spilled out on the air, and it did make for great TV, YouTube or great radio. It totally did.
Yeah, absolutely. I was expecting for people to get more butthurt over the fact that Robert Pattinson is the Batman or isn't the Batman. I feel like that's all anybody's talking about for this last week, is that it keeps getting confirmed and then almost unconfirmed, but we still think it's happening. It's weird. It's a weird way to have this come out.
Right. So at last I checked, and even today as I was preparing for our show, he's still confirmed, correct?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Okay. Yeah, folks, if you hear anything different, let us know. But, cause I was like, okay, I'm running with it this time. And I posted it on all our stuff, and I haven't heard anything to the contrary, cause I didn't want to pull everything down again and say, no, like we did before. It's like, no, actually, he's not the Batman, but it looks like Warner Brothers has officially signed off on it. So I think maybe it was, they were putting out the, smoke signals and trial balloons early just to sort of see how fandom was going to react, if there were going to be petitions and all the other BS that we've seen recently with news about casting or trailers or whatever. And, I guess they were like, okay, I think, the Q rating, the positives outweigh the negatives, and we'll officially drop it on a Friday.
I think it was leaked. I think WB got caught with their hand in a cookie jar, and it wasn't supposed to come out like this, because and this just goes along with their track record over the years with all of these movies. They've had issues with directors, issues with talent coming and going, and especially this movie. This movie was originally supposed to be starring and directing by Ben Affleck, and look how that worked out. So I honestly think that it wasn't planned for them to come out, for it to drop like this, because if everything's going to change, then why still a week of mixed signals when it's like, no, we know this is happening. So I really do think it was a leak, and they were a bit caught off guard, to say the least.
Yeah, I think you're right. because it was one of those things that it dropped, I guess, Friday mid-morning Eastern time, early morning Western time, and it was like, oh, really? And I was like, I saw the Deadline article on News Alerts, and I was just like, huh, okay. So I clicked on over, and sure enough, it was said that he was cast, and then Entertainment Weekly and a few other outlets picked it up as well. And I think you're right. I think it was one of those things that was scooped, and then they were really running to play catch up, because they probably were hoping to do a lot more fanfare of releasing the new version of Batman, the younger Batman.
Yeah. And I mean, now WB, there's no going back. Like, if you take this away from me, I will riot. And people, stop with the petitions. The petitions, this is why we can't have nice things, okay? But speaking of leaky things and the DCU, this week on the DC Universe streaming service, they dropped the first episode of Swamp Thing, which originally was supposed to be, I guess, either 13 or 15 episodes, but 13, due to production, they cut it down to 10, which I'm kind of thankful for. Yeah. I watched probably 60 to 80% of this pilot. I don't like jump scares. I really don't like them. So I spent a lot of time trying to look on other websites as the jump scares occurred, resulting in me only owning about like a percentage of actually watching the pilot.
Fair enough. I had the same. I run hot and cold with horror films and TV shows and stuff, and I will say that first off with episode count, it is going to be 10 from 13. I guess there was some production issues, creative differences. They were able to, from my understanding, rewrite what they needed to do to finish out the arc and everything. So that being said, the pilot itself, with the jump scares and everything, I really enjoyed it. It was DC Universe keeps with each show. I know it's early, it's just a pilot, but coming out of the gate, each one just gets progressively stronger.
I'm not gonna drink that Kool-Aid quite yet. Yeah. I found it very refreshing. Mm-hmm. Because we've lately been talking a lot about shows in this genre specifically that are a lot of teams and groups of people fighting together for a common cause. So for them to produce a mini horror movie almost, and set it in a new location. It's not in the big city. It's in a small town. Small town with a history, small town that is like almost decaying in front of them. And to have like a simple story between a girl and a boy who inadvertently cross paths. It was nice because we haven't seen it in a while. We haven't seen this kind of take, and it's a new area of DC that we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what I say, how I like the pilot, and I think they're strong. I mean, Doom Patrol, looking back, definitely was a great pilot kickoff for a series. And again, to your point, a refreshing take, at least in this at least with the Doom Patrol context, it was in the teams. But this one was refreshing in that it was a fast hour to be in a good way. Despite the moments where, I mean, the guy popping up off the gurney table was that I freely admit I was like, I can't watch this.
That was so gross. But hands off to the special effects, because I feel like, to go to your point, what they are really doing with these shows is, if you compare production between Titans and Doom Patrol and Swamp Thing, they keep elevating their game. They keep leveling up with the production value. granted, I didn't really like how Swamp Thing looked at the end of the episode. Spoiler alert. Overall, I thought that it was a really good, had some really well done special effects and also just grossness.
Yeah, it was the gross factor was definitely there. And something I know we've had discussions on long-term listeners will know how you are really a stickler for practical effects versus CGI, and I really felt that they did a good job blending the practical effects and the CGI with this episode, and it was very seamless, and their production, you're right, the production values with these shows do continue to get stronger with each iteration. For a streaming service, clearly they probably won't fully ever tell us what their budgets are and those types of things, but the DC and Warner Brothers, they are putting some money behind this, and I think it does help, quite frankly, that Greg Berlanti is the production company behind this, so he has a well-established track record with the network, with WB, and I think because of that, he can get these big dollars to put behind these shows on this platform, and ultimately, who knows, maybe they'll integrate DC Universe into a larger WB platform, but it's clear they are their financials or whatever they're looking at, they are definitely throwing dollars at these shows, and the work product is shows, and on the production, even the casting. I mean, they've been able to get some very strong casting of actors, and it's just really been. They have really, in the year, well, not even a year, which is funny. In the time that this service has been out, which I guess is just really since last fall, they have really come out with 3 very strong products.
2 very strong products. Two strong products.
Yeah, I know you're not. Yeah, well, Titans. It's always, well, yeah. You definitely want to, in order to keep people, you definitely want to obviously elevate the product as you go forward, because you don't want to start out of the gate with something strong and then it goes downhill, and they haven't done that.
It's okay. We all know you're a DC shill.
I'm a total, not shill. I wish I were a shill. Send me a check, see?
So as I was watching the show, because I know nothing about Swamp Thing, I just know it's horror related, I started immediately Googling different characters that we were being introduced to. And so I had no idea, like, for the first half hour that Alec was going to ultimately become Swamp Thing. That's like how much I know about this series. Yeah. But I kept thinking, the more I think about it, I wonder if this is going to retrospectively be a missed opportunity, because what they could have done is they could have just had the first season be about him and Abby trying to investigate this virus that's occurring because of the swamp, and at the end have him turn, because clearly they're going to go for the love story angle. They have to with these 2 characters. They just met, Will, and he's already Swamp Thing now. It's going to take me a while to figure out if I can really buy their chemistry. Like, did he really make that much of an impression on her for her to all of a sudden be obsessed with him? I don't know. Yeah. Like, that's where I'm kind of like, I think they initially had the right approach, and then for some reason they're just like, and by the end of the episode we're going to have this explosion. It's like, well, there was a lot more to explore. I mean, he's even has his secrets that we don't know about.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I did that. If I did, that was one of the things in the pilot that I wish they had delayed the transformation until the 2nd or 3rd episode. Because I like you, I just didn't feel. I mean, I saw the sparks, and they did a lot with the scenes between Alec and Abby to show that budding romance that will happen whenever he does become Swamp Thing. But I guess it's hard for me to see how that can develop because it was such a short time period.
Exactly.
So it's just in the believability factor of it. And obviously we have 9 more episodes to go, so we'll see how it unfolds. But that one is kind of a hard narrative pill for me to swallow at this point.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they have a lot of time to make up for it and prove us wrong, but initially that's my first reaction to it. I'm like, I would have made a different choice. Just like, why can't RJ Tyler get a job? Like, seriously, he's in the first scene and then they kill him off, and I'm like, really? What is going on with this kid that he can't lock down a good long-term job? They killed him on Black Lightning too after a few episodes. Jesus, did he piss somebody off? That's all I'm saying. He's a good actor.
He was the poor sacrificial person of color that had to go at the beginning in a horror film. There's always got to be one.
I knew you were going to say that. As soon as I'm like, I know exactly what Will's going to say.
Yeah, at least the folks in the hospital didn't get killed whenever the creature went off in the lab downstairs. But
definitely. And shout out to Crystal Reed. For anybody who's listening who's seen Teen Wolf, she continues to secure shows in this genre. She actually did a stint on Gotham, too. Yeah, cool. So she's very much a DC person.
Yeah. Another thing, I don't know if you know this, but some of the creative team behind Battlestar Galactica is part of the show running team.
Nope, did not know that at all.
Yeah, so I know how much of a big Battlestar fan you are. Mark Verheiden, the lead writers of the show, is was behind the creative team of Battlestar. So
we'll see what that lends to, because I don't agree with one writing decision already.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you there too. And I'm trying to figure out, will they, as they open and explore this universe, will we have flashbacks with Alec, and as far as getting into the researched what he had with the Sunderlands. Clearly they opened up a lot of doors there with the Sunderland family. They're sort of old money in the town, and Abby and Mrs. Sunderland have a history there because Abby was best friends with their daughter, and her daughter ended up getting killed, and they blame Abby for it. So there's plenty of things there to mine, and I wonder if they'll have some flashbacks with that, especially given that Abby's basically, at least in Sunderland's viewpoint, persona non grata in the town.
I completely agree, and I see that happening because they did a lot of planting of seeds in this episode, pun intended, and which it's a pilot. That's what they're supposed to do. It's all set up. It's all, let me introduce you to all of these storylines that we're going to mine out for the rest of the season. The one thing that they did not acknowledge that I think is very intriguing, and I wonder if they're holding back, is Abby's family.
Mm.
At one point I thought they were going to do this change and be like, oh, actually she changed her last name and she's actually a Sunderland too for a moment, and then they didn't. And so I'm like, well, where's her dad? Where's her mom? What happened there? Because when she left town, she didn't just leave behind the Sunderland. She left her own family there too. And from what I understand is that her dad in particular has a large role to play in this narrative, but that could be a season 2 or 3 storyline.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah. Yeah. As like you, I'm really not as familiar with a lot of the story with Swamp Thing beyond the previous live action, the movie that was made, I guess, back in the 80s with Louis Jordan and Adrian Barbeau, and Dick Durek was the Swamp Thing at that point. but as far as the comic, I really haven't read it, so I'm gonna have to definitely do my wiki homework to get up to speed on all the narratives and see how they blend the stories in the comics and all the various iterations from different writers into the show.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, from one streaming service to another, it took him a while, but finally Will sat down and watched season 2 of Cobra Kai.
Yeah, I did. And like 2 nights.
He was really excited about it too.
Yeah, I did. I had to get through all the other shows first, but the same thing happened if folks remember with me in season 1, because I was late to the party, but once I got in the door, I pretty much just made myself a home, and I did that with this one, season 2 as well.
Yeah, I did the same exact thing because it's so easy to binge with the half-hour episodes, and you know what's going on, so it's like, oh, 4 hours went by and I watched like most of the season in one sitting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you think of season 2?
I liked it. It was serviceable. I enjoyed season 1 better.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this season there were just it was obviously it was enough there to keep me engaged for 2 nights. It was, I thought, a good continuation of the story with Cobra Kai and Daniel and Johnny, and of course bringing back Kreese, who's the original sensei for Cobra Kai, and all the dynamics and things that is part of this universe. A couple things that did take me out of it, and was the fight scenes this year were kind of over the top as far as like where they should be as far as like martial artists. I was like, man, they're like Jean-Claude Van Damme in it there, and they really are just a bunch of white belts. I mean, come on. I mean, they were well choreographed, but it was kind of like, all right, yeah, okay, yeah, that's a little bit too advanced for you guys at this point in your careers, but so that was a little taking me out. But as far as the one narrative thing that continues to just drive through, which the old rivalry, even when Johnny and Danielson tried to bury the hatchet and there was a great scene of the two of them with their Daniel with his wife and Johnny with Miguel, who's one of the characters, his mother, in a restaurant, and there was a great scene, spoiler alert, of them, truly bonding, and we had that in season 1 too. I think when they were like when Johnny was testing out a car, and whenever you think things are finally, after 25 years or however long it's been since the original Karate Kid, they finally get things going in the right direction, and then something happens to, of course, rip off that Band-Aid, and just the old wounds just come back with a vengeance. Right.
I 100. I agree. I was about to say 100, and I'm like, but you threw out like 3 points, and 1 point I didn't even realize was happening on the show. So, I disagree with the fighting because I didn't even notice it. You're not the first person to say that about the season 2, and I'm like, oh, well, I guess you're probably right, but for me, it didn't like take me out. What took me out was Samantha. Samantha was so stupid this season.
Yeah.
I have to say, I'm so angry as what they did, because she just turned into that annoying schoolgirl. I love you. I don't love you. Yeah. This is right. This is wrong. And I'm just like, where's the backbone of this character? Like, what? This isn't about two guys. She needs to be focused. Like, what are they trying to say about who she is? And she became much more of a love interest as opposed to anything else. Like, she was pretty much a plot device used throughout the whole season, and not necessarily even a character.
Yeah, I found that with both female leads, actually. Even, what was her name? Well, no, but it was, No, but
Tori.
her, was that?
It's Tori.
Tori, yes, Tori, sorry. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I did not like about, both female leads in that you could tell the show was written by guys.
Thank you.
because,
Can.
yeah, because the female leads were basically the same archetype of, like you said, the damsel in distress, not thinking, not having their own agency, and that was. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was another thing that did take me out of the show a little bit. Even though I enjoyed it, but I just did have some issues with it as I was watching. I'm like, come on, they just both were just, yeah, they were written by men, and it just is so clear that they were, and it was not a good thing.
Yeah, because the show does really good with Daniel and Johnny, that complicated relationship. I mean, one of my favorite episodes is that episode where you think they're finally going to become friends again. And then because of things that the kids are doing, suddenly it gets complicated and the lines blur. But they also had some good potential with Miguel and Robbie having that same volatile relationship where they probably would be friends if certain events didn't happen the way they did. And also their jealousy and their rivalry is rooted because of the attention of Johnny and wanting to be his son, and Miguel not having his father in the picture. So there's a lot there.
Yeah.
You throw in the love interest stuff, you dilute all of that because it just becomes a melodrama.
Yeah. And not and it's just like, yeah, you're just it's just fast forwarding the movie, just plug in the kids in for the originals, and so it was. And I'm proud to be happy to be stood corrected if there were some female writers in this season, but I don't think there were, because I remember seeing them actually on Collider Live. I think some of the folks on the production team were interviewed on the show, and there is this, it's a bunch of dudes, and so I don't want to belabor that point, but it definitely, I'm glad you brought it up, because it did take you out of it a little bit.
Granted, the melodrama that I'm used to watching doesn't lead to one of the kids falling to pretty much what should be their death, but instead they just broke their back, and who knows if they'll ever walk again. Like, Jesus, that fight scene is crazy. Like,
it was.
I agree. Like, you have to suspend disbelief for a lot of what happened because of how long it was, but it was really entertaining. And as soon as they climbed up those stairs, I'm like, oh, somebody's gonna get it.
Yeah,
and I didn't think it was gonna be Miguel. I think that's genius.
Yeah. I thought it was going to be the girls. I thought it was going to be Samantha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. But then again, that wouldn't have done anything for her character, because now she has guilt, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And it's good that it was Robbie, because Miguel won last season. Well, in a way, but he also lost too, because Johnny saw what he created. Mm-hmm. And there was some kind of despair over that. And then in this season, you have Johnny do that to Miguel, and suddenly the family that Johnny has found himself placed into probably won't want him anymore. And there's a lot of issues.
Yeah, narratively, it did make sense for it to be Miguel for all the reasons that you raised, and Johnny truly finding that son relationship he didn't have with his own blood son, and it definitely complicates things. To getting back to the fight itself, it definitely was like Marvel-esque in the way it all unfolded in the halls and stuff. I mean, it was well choreographed, but Miguel falling, that definitely was a gut-wrenching moment, for sure. And spoiler alert, when we get to the end of the season, Johnny's, well, I'll just say Johnny is having to deal with a lot of stuff, and I'll just leave it there. And there's a couple other points I don't want to spoil for folks who haven't watched it, but definitely go check it out. It's a very entertaining, quick watch.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so that brings us to Cloak and Dagger Season 2 finale, Level Up. The show hasn't been renewed for Season 3 yet. It's kind of disappointing, everybody.
I think they're holding off until San Diego Comic-Con.
Okay.
That's the only thing I can figure at this point. Because I know the showrunner, he teased, the show getting some Emmy consideration for outstanding drama.
Mm-hmm.
And, Marvel Studios and Freeform and I mean, they're promoting the hell out of it. So I don't know if they're doing that to try to drive up numbers, or they are just really showing that they're just be patient folks. We're 100% behind this show. Cause I mean, they're putting Olivia and Aubrey out there promoting everything. I mean, they're even showing up on like late night TV,
Mm-hmm.
So, and they were pretty prominent in the upfronts, with the Disney, upfront day. So I think they're just holding off until San Diego Comic-Con.
I wonder if some of it is also that we're going to just fast forward right to the end, because they did something I didn't expect in the end. Tandy and Tyrone are leaving New Orleans.
Yep.
And so, and I saw a few things that are hinting that this is going to be how they team them up with the Runaways, which is a show that initially was on Hulu and then got canceled and picked up by Freeform.
Okay. Yeah, it did. Cause I guess Runaways will be on this fall.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, it could, I know we've talked, maybe offline from the show, but as far as the potential for, the crossover between, these two shows and, yes, they were going out of town. Of course, Bridget had let them know about some, a group of girls who had shown up then on the shores down south. So, I mean, that could be, you say down south from New Orleans, it's the Gulf. So I assume they must be going to Texas or something.
Yeah, I don't know what direction it was from. I don't know, because, and originally I thought it was New York because Bridget is from New York.
Right.
So there are some tie-ins there.
Yeah.
But then everybody's talking about them being a crossover with the Runaways, and that would be California.
That'd be Los Angeles, yeah.
So.
I mean, it could be, yeah. I mean, I think that's the brilliance of it. I mean, I think it opens up the door for us to really speculate, and really just narratively, I think whenever I was watching the episode and saw that they were that Tandy was on the bus, and then of course Tyrone showed up, I was like, I applauded, because in two regards. One, it was narratively, I think they've gone as far as they can in their growth in New Orleans. So and given that this is a coming of age show, it totally makes sense for them to go out and just like spread your wings, like going off to college and then, or going off to the military, whatever you do after you graduate from high school. So it was very fitting for them in their journey to do that, for one.
I 100% agree. I think that if they had done season 3 with another Loa, I would have been like, we've already seen this. You need to bring something else. Like, this season finale is called Level Up. The writers need to level up now. Yeah. They need to expand the universe or give us something new, because you can't keep going back to that well. Now, granted, I think there's a Dr. Voodoo, which a lot of people have been saying has been hinted at this season. Okay, that sounds like a season 5 villain. Yeah. I mean, just because they're leaving New Orleans right now doesn't mean they're never coming back. Doesn't mean that they're not going someplace else.
Right. And I learned that. I'm glad you brought that as far as a season 5 type of villain, because I was reading some articles from the where the showrunner was interviewed, and he talked about how he hopes that this is a 7 season journey, a lot like where we, like, for example, in another show we talk about Mr. Robot, where he has a vision crafted out for acts 1 through 7. And so, and one of the things he did bring up is the fact that he hopes to, see people like Mayhem and others, Adina and, come back. So, because you do have such great, supporting characters that we've come to know over the last 2 years, and we can't see them just completely just being disappearing, because they are pretty integral to Ty and Tandy's story. Right.
So overall, what did you think of this finale?
I liked it. Mm-hmm. I really did. It was, if it were for a season finale, it hit everything that a season finale needs to do, which it definitely closed up all the little arcs that we've had, that were patched this season. It closes things that we've seen from the very beginning, as far as what happened to Connors, as far as him murdering Billy and finally getting justice for for the Johnsons, as far as him being found, guilty, and his father, he has his moment of, getting back into good grace after his fall. Bridget and her story, coming to peace with Mayhem, but also, having, opening a new relationship with Mina. Mina, because she was a Devastator or Destroyer from the first season when they had the negative energy, she was infused with it. So there was a lot of threads that were hatched that they really tied up. And Evita, how can we forget Evita? There's just so many things that her now taking Auntie Chantil's place, and her into her romance with Ty, and her new life, as far as her new journey, and being very integral to helping Ty and Tandy defeat Andre.
Right. I actually felt like this finale was somewhat anticlimactic. And and I feel like what should have happened is, they often always start their season with the first and second episode back to back. But I really feel like they shouldn't have done that, and instead should have aired those episodes separately and aired this episode with the episode 9 back to back. Because I felt like you had so much momentum that this episode really just felt like an epilogue for majority of the time. Like, after they kill off Andre, it just suddenly felt really slowed down, and tying up loose ends and going through that. And also some of the stuff with Andre, it was cool because this is the first time we've really seen Tyrone in the rabbit hole, and I wanted to see more of that, because he like literally encountered himself.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel about that. Because meanwhile, Tandy's like encountering her abusive father, and that's a demon that we've known about for now 2 seasons, and we've known about Ty and his expectations, and trying to realize that just because he took a different route in his life doesn't mean he failed. But it felt also, I don't know how to put it. There was something about where I almost felt like it went on too long between them, with Andre trying to make them stop, and I don't know, it just felt like, okay, the action can stop and we can focus. I don't know.
No, that's a very fair point. I think let's take each one of them separately here, as far as their confrontations at the end, because I think you're right. Your first point, which was they should have, scheduling wise, had episodes 9 and 10, as you said, back to back. Because the way that there was such momentum that was built up last week with Blue Note, and then with people disappearing and everything, it was kind of hard to get back into that tension when this episode started with the people disappearing. So I think I will agree with you. I think they should have put those two back to back as just a 2-hour kind of finale night event. Second, as far as Ty confronting himself, as far as his despair, I could go either way with that. I see your point in that it was something that we have been missing. We talked about how we've missed Ty's journey this season, and then putting it into the season finale like this, it did feel a bit rushed.
Mm-hmm.
That and it's been teased but it was teased through Tandy's visions of hope early on when she saw the perfect version of Ty, where he is a police officer in the New Orleans Police Department, and he's married to Vita, and his family's back together, and everyone's happy.
Right.
So we've seen that version of Ty teed up before, so through Tandy. So it was very fitting. These two are obviously linked, and so he confronting that version of himself, and all the opportunities that he's had, and all the guilt that he's felt the last 2 years of not measuring up. It was what better way for Despair to basically use that mirror on Ty to just double down to make Ty go even deeper down that rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that. The other route they could have gone with him is I think with Connors, it was a little unfinished because Adina took care of Connors before Ty. He had some closure, or maybe a closure is not the right word. He had some resolution with Connors killing Billy. So I don't know how much more they could have mined from that.
Oh, I think it was dead. I think that issue has been dead for a little bit now.
Yeah. The only and other place where we could go would be Billy, and as far as still the feelings of guilt with that. So I mean, I'm just trying to make the counterpoint as far as what other places they could have mined for Ty to feel that kind of despair. And I think they've really resolved those things. So, but that big one in the room has been that feeling of guilt and stuff. So I think it was very fitting that was what they focused on this episode.
Yeah. And that's what I was getting at. It was that I felt like it was an odd choice, but I also understand how at the end of the day, based off of everything that's happened, that's the obvious choice to make at the same time for him to confront that version of himself. But yeah, I felt like the whole action sequence in the rabbit hole just kept going on and on and on and on and on. And they made small changes, but it just still felt like it was taking a while to get there because I almost felt like it took too long, realistically, considering how much Tandy and Tyrone have really gone through. Like, they could have made that breakthrough a lot sooner, in my opinion, rather Andre having a few more scenes to play. But then again, he's the big bad, so sometimes you have to make it almost feel like it's impossible to beat him, and then they come out and get him. Which, by the way, how stupid are we? Yeah, Tandy's daggers are made of hope. Of course. That's the whole thing. And we even called it out, like, during the episode a few weeks ago. Yeah, when she's in the motel, she doesn't get the dagger. The dagger only comes to her when somebody else gets their hope back in that motel. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the great thing about the show. There's so many layers and so many textures to it. I mean, we can be forgiven for missing something like that because, I mean, they've done a good job of creating a universe that is grounded, but yet still a superhero show. And it was one of the things too I liked that, as you mentioned, it was kind of an epilogue to, for the seasons, seeing how the thing, like, for example, with Ty, knowing he can't solve all crime in New Orleans, but there was a good moment. That was a good touch. I'm glad they remembered to show that moment where, the kid that he's been interacting with throughout the season, when they were back to selling drugs and stuff, but he saw the ladies in the car clearly being trafficked. They didn't forget that point, and they were like, no, we can't deal with you, man. We can't deal with you. So, those things. And then, of course, Tandy, there was a few cheesy moments like the Zorro on her dad. So.
I still don't get that choice. I was like, no, don't do it.
Yeah, it was trying to maybe put a little bit of lightness into a very tense moment, but yeah, it can't be perfect.
No, they wrapped up everything that they knew, and I think that shows like how this show is written. It's written in a way where clearly everyone is talking about each chapter continuously, so that you can make sure the right lines and items are hinted at, so when you get your payoff, sometimes it feels like more of a surprise, like the daggers did, and there were a few other magic tricks they did early on this season, as opposed to some other shows that we talk about where it feels like everything is much more confined in the space of that one episode, as opposed to, no, if you were to allude to this in this episode, then there would be a bigger payoff down the line.
Yeah, definitely. You're completely right about that. And, there were some great payoffs. The daggers, the evolution, of their powers, where they leveled up and they finally got proper superhero costumes, which again, like to your point earlier, how they tie everything back together, Ty's cloak being the one that Billy constructed from season 1, and of course Tandy's being the perfect version of herself, the ballerina. So those are the details that I think which makes this show very enjoyable, and like you said, carrying those threads through all the way, and reminding it being a tapestry over the course of a season.
Yeah. I just don't know which fight scene was more poorly lit. Was it the fight scene between O'Reilly and the Loa, or that Game of Thrones battle for Winterfell? Like,
yeah, that was
Christ, guys, get another candle.
Yeah. Yeah, that fight scene, yeah, it was a little if there was something that was anticlimactic for me in the episode, that one definitely wasn't as well executed as I would have hoped, but they made up for it with Tandy jumping out of the cloak with the sword. So,
yeah, definitely. I agree. It kind of felt like they wanted Bridget to be involved, but they didn't know how to make sense of it, considering Tyrone and Tandy had to go into the rabbit hole, and he didn't want to bring Mayhem down there because, before Mayhem's been down there with Tandy and she kind of saved the day a few times. So you need them to have their moments. So what do you do with Bridget when clearly she can help out? You make her a bodyguard.
Basically, yeah. But I guess if you make her a bodyguard, but it works with both Bridget and Evita at that moment, even though it was poorly lit and the fighting was kind of, again, hard to follow. But the bigger picture, the bigger point of them both being somewhat estranged from Ty and Tandy at this point, because obviously with Tyrone and Evita's relationship ending, and Tandy and Bridget not really seeing eye to eye on, again, this question of justice and revenge and everything. But yet at the end of the day, those two characters, have Ty and Tandy's back, and despite all the issues that they're dealing with, they can still count on him to help. I mean, Evita was basically the key to keeping them alive. Because if the candle went out, then, you know, they're trapped in the pocket dimension with Andre.
Yeah. Yeah. They used the pocket dimension a lot this season. So,
They did.
But I think, I mean, Level Up is kind of the perfect name for this finale, because that's really what this whole season was about. It was about these characters. They now understand their powers, but how far can they really push it? And last season we saw a lot of them viewing other people's hopes and dreams. And this was much more about the pocket dimension and what that is and how he can manipulate that. While Tandy, it's much more about the daggers aren't only a weapon, but they're hope. And how can hope be a weapon? Well, it's actually a very useful weapon.
Very, very.
When you're battling despair.
Yeah.
So it, and I mean, was some really good moments between the two of them in this episode. I'm gonna get my relationship soon, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, either way, the way that, of course, waffles. And if we don't get a season 3, I really hope we do, but if we don't, I will be okay the way the series ended with them all the way out on the bus like that. I wouldn't feel cheated if by some chance the show gets canceled.
I completely agree, because that's what I was thinking in my mind. I'm like, I feel like the writers at some point said, we have to end it in this way, because there isn't a guarantee we can continue the story. And if not, this is the way to end it. And I feel like arguably they did the same thing with season 1, which again, this is why it's a well-written show, because they understand that they've only been awarded a certain amount of time to tell a story. And so they're not focused on like, oh, well, season 2, season 3, it's kind of like, well, if we're only allotted this time, what story do we tell?
Yeah.
And how do we tell it? As opposed to, okay, well, if we have to do this setup, but there's no payoff because we didn't get renewed.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I read where the showrunner actually did write a scene that would have happened, I think, after them on the bus, but he rightly cut it, and he said he's just going to use it. He didn't say what it was going to be, but he was going to just, if they do get a 3rd season, they would that would be the opening scene for the 3rd season. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
They cut it, and it's going to be the intro for, See, it's writing is so huge for all of this. You got to have a plan, but you have to also know when your plan isn't working
or could not work, and
yeah, you got to adjust. But I think that is it for us today.
Yeah. That is, folks. If you missed any of those prior episodes, or if it's your first time listening to us and looking for some shows to binge this summer, I think at least 2 of them which have completed, I can't strongly recommend enough. Cloak and Dagger, and also Cobra Kai, and let us know what you think about Swamp Thing.
Yep, and Will, why don't you tell them where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me at Will M. Polk, that's WILLMPOLK on Twitter.
And you can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at SNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. But most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Spotify. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.